I knew you'd come.
The Hearts of Stone DLC opened us up to very well written characters and quests. It's all so intricately wired and offers an inexplicable experience. And even though this DLC is somewhat shorter than what CD Projekt Red usually delivers, length isn't what they were trying to release here. I'm always quick to give praise to the writing team that wrote The Witcher 3 and its DLCs, but what they did with this DLC redefined the way I judge games in general. The Blood and Wine DLC focused more on world building and ambience than it does on writing, and that's not to say it wasn't well written, but Hearts of Stone shows you just how much pain one can indirectly summon at the hands of his own greed. Everything from the writing all the way to the music complement the true meaning behind the plot, and the characters that develop the story could be psychoanalyzed for days on end, and that's what I want to do in today's video. Hey there everyone, my name is Xith, and today we have the long-awaited discussion video on Olgierd von Everec's fate in The Witcher 3 Hearts of Stone DLC expansion. The success of my discussion video on Caradin was heartwarming to say the least, and people have requested more similar videos on other topics in The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. Since there are plenty of difficult decisions to make in this game, we'll have more of these coming in the future. So if you enjoy videos like these and want to see more, please do not hesitate to show your support in the form of liking and subscribing. Before we continue, I'm completely aware other people have made similar discussion videos on today's topic, but I also want to make it clear that I've been planning this ever since my video on Caradin, and it's been brewing in my head for more than 2 years now. In other news, I've hit 1,000 subscribers and I've managed to sort out personal issues that have more or less stopped me from making videos, so videos in general should be coming out a bit more frequently in the future.
You must know that he came from a wealthy, influential line. He must have, if the family of his betrothed accepted him. Yet did you know his fortune soured?
Now moving on to the topic at hand, Olgierd's fate. Olgierd von Everec is the oldest son of Christina and Bohumil von Everec. The von Everecs were Redanian nobility, being seen as a very respected family throughout Redania. This naturally entitled Olgierd to a life of nobility, and both him and his brother Vladimir grew up on their renowned family estate near Oxenfurt and Novigrad. Both him and his brother grew up training with swords, becoming proficient swordsmen by the time they were old enough to fight. He was not only known for his prowess with a blade, however, for he educated himself and took to enjoying the finer things in life such as reading, writing, and art. When you pair both combat prowess and intelligence, you have one deadly commanding officer and soldier. This is why Olgierd became an officer for the Redanian army and later on the Ataman of the Redanian Free Company. His brother Vladimir, on the other hand, was a more brash hedonist, enjoying simpler pleasures such as women and alcohol. Vladimir held Olgierd in high regards, and as Olgierd's younger brother, Vladimir became his second in command when it came to the Free Company. They both went on to use their power and group to regularly raid villages and towns throughout Velen and Temeria's borderlands, commandeering Viking-like raids on unknowing peasants. Although leading a life like this was somewhat normal for proud nobility back in those days, it's where we can start to see why Olgierd's life continued down the path it did. Raiding villages and enacting power over innocent peasants for purely personal gain isn't exactly a life that will amount to anything truly meaningful. Regardless, karma eventually caught up to the von Everec family and they were forced into debt due to collective misfortune. Now, to skip all of the details, they eventually lost their family estate, and Olgierd even lost the love of his life Iris to an Ophiri prince. Olgierd's life now seemed ruined and he was homeless, feeling nothing but the tight grip of despair. The only way for him to start anew was to renew his family's financial stability, and this is where the infamous Gaunter Odim comes into play. Olgierd still had so much of himself to lose, but gave it all in a life-changing contract instead. Gaunter granted him 3 wishes in exchange for the life of someone he loved dearly. Either Iris or Vladimir were at stake here, and Olgierd chose the latter, which sealed his brother's fate. He quickly became immortal, rich, and as a result, devoid of empathy. Losing the one thing that makes us all human was unfortunately a side effect of his immortality, and it began to affect his life even more than homelessness ever could. He lived, but with little to no purpose, knowing he doomed his brother to an early death and eventually ruined his marriage with Iris, sentencing her to a miserable life and afterlife within the von Everec estate. He soon left his estate behind and went on to lead his free company from their headquarters in Garen Estate.
A curse? No, wouldn't call it that. I'll put it this way. You must be careful what you wish for, lest your wish be granted. For there are consequences.
The first time we encounter him is when he hires Geralt for a contract, and it all spirals from here when it turns out that the monster is actually the Ophiri prince that Iris was supposed to marry, and that Olgierd cursed him. After Geralt gets captured by Ophiri officials at the end of that quest, Gaunter appears and offers Geralt a deal for his freedom. This deal included honoring Olgierd's 3 requests so that Gaunter could end the contract and collect his rightful debt. Gaunter introduced Geralt as the champion who would fulfill these 3 requests, and the entire DLC is centered around these 3 requests. Now, I won't go into detail regarding those requests, but each one reveals the horrific struggles and actions that led to Olgierd's empty emotional state. Geralt and Olgierd meet at the Temple of Levani by the end of the DLC, where Gaunter eventually appears. This is where both Olgierd and Gaunter stand together on the moon, finalizing their pact once and for all. You can let Gaunter collect his debt in the form of Olgierd's soul, or challenge Gaunter at his own game for the freedom of Olgierd's soul, putting Geralt's life on the line as well. Now, when looking at these 2 decisions, we have to keep in mind what kind of an entity Gaunter O'Dim is. We've seen what the deity behind the name Gaunter O'Dim can do throughout each stage of this DLC, and was still in no way, shape or form ready to confirm his true nature. There might not even be a name for what he is, but his ability to manipulate time and life as naturally as he does is one of the many indicators of his otherworldly power. Anyone who even dares to explore his true nature is not met with death, but a long and treacherous existence that swallows your sanity whole.
So what are you? A demon? A djinn?
Do you really wish to know?
Yes.
No, Geralt. You don't. This one time I shall spare you and not grant your wish. All who have learned my true name are now either dead or have met an even worse fate.
This is sadly what happened to Professor Prementi in Shakes Lock, one who delved deeper than any curious mind should. His work uncovered secrets surrounding the deity behind Gaunter and potential ways to beat it at its own game. He paid dearly for this knowledge, however, being rendered blind and forced to suffer the twisted nature of Gaunter's games.
Gaunter O'Dim is no man. He is evil. Evil which assumes various forms. Forget about him, or die.
You're alive.
Alive? Yet I live in constant fear, born of what I've learned about him.
If you pay attention to every conversation you have with Gaunter during this DLC and eventually finish it, it'll become clear to you just how much power stands behind those charismatic words of his, and this induces an entirely new sense of fear, one that no other video game antagonist has managed to replicate. Some would comfortably call him the devil given how his actions present him in this DLC, but think about how fortunate Geralt is to be in the position of his champion. If anything, Gaunter harbors a great deal of respect for Geralt, which is why he kept it straightforward with him and honors their deal properly every step of the way without any tricks involved. But imagine crossing a deity like this, especially not knowing of its true origins. And I've always thought about this dilemma in a more cautious way when looking through the lens of Geralt. Witchers usually never fight a beast without doing their proper research and calculating the risk, so I doubt that a Witcher like Geralt would ever step on Gaunter's toes and intervene to save Olgierd. I know you might think that what the aforementioned professor learned might be useful in beating Gaunter at his own game, but what he learned barely scratches the surface of how Gaunter truly operates, so I doubt that a Witcher who's seen as much as Geralt has seen would view that as enough research for defeating the devil at his own game. You also have to consider that if we were to remove the saving mechanic from the game, Geralt would only get one shot at outplaying Gaunter, one very risky shot. Intervening makes little logical sense when you take into consideration how careful Geralt usually is, and you always have to take into account that he still may be in search of Ciri or even wants to lead a proper life down the line, so angering or potentially even challenging an omnipotent deity seems like too much of a risk, even for a Witcher. It seems completely out of place for me to want to sacrifice the life of the most renowned Witcher on the continent for the life of a person who sold himself out recklessly. And although he did do it for love, the wishes from that pact perverted his sense of morality and mortality, destroying and abandoning the lives of many that were dear to him. Vladimir, although reckless and hedonistic, did not deserve to be betrayed by the one he practically worshipped. Iris, on the other hand, suffered the worst of it all. She gave up her parents to be with Olgierd in the beginning, and later witnessed the death of her father at the hands of the one she gave herself to. It's tragic to think about how hurt Iris felt, giving up everything for someone who had a change of heart. Olgierd's entire estate was tainted due to the immense pain she suffered in the very confines of that villa, and having to traverse through Iris's heartbreaking memories makes you think about the magnitude of one person's actions. Unfortunately, her heart was tied to a heart of stone.
She loved me. After all that's passed. Iris. What a mess we made of it all. If I'd only known then how it would end.
His lack of empathy would have never been present if he hadn't made a deal with the devil, but you can't receive something like immortality without losing the most important aspects of mortality, and I think Olgierd knew this.
You signed the contract, Olgierd. I'm just fulfilling its terms, to the letter. Unhappy? Hell, should have chosen your words more carefully.
Yes, I should have.
Talking to Olgierd shows us that he is in fact intelligent and very well educated, but what he chose to do with his immortality and intelligence is why I don't believe his life is worth more than Geralt's, especially because he made the conscious decision to deal with the devil. I know that many people detach from Geralt as a character with his own thoughts when they play these games, but I nearly always play the Witcher games by role-playing an accurate representation of Geralt, so this might not apply to you if you play The Witcher 3 differently. I honestly believe that no ending here is good nor bad. Olgierd may not deserve the sheer amount of pain and torment that befell him and his family, but he wasn't careful with what he wished for and with whom he dealt. This is why I applaud CD Projekt Red. They've written the antagonist in such a manner where you have to rethink your own morality in order to approach this dilemma. Let me know what you think about it in the comments down below. I'm very open to people offering different perspectives on topics like these. Now, if Olgierd is saved and regains his heart, so to say, he starts feeling the remorse and pain of everything he has done, vowing to start a new mortal life. And I definitely feel for Olgierd and believe he is much more complex than a mere thug, but this doesn't negate the fact that he willingly put you and many others in harm's way just to retain his immortality, so I wouldn't blame anyone for feeling like they don't owe Olgierd anything. Having nothing to do with an entity like Odim is better for everyone, and sometimes it's smarter not to involve yourself in matters devised by the personification of evil. Any outcome where you don't owe the devil is the better outcome.